Hi. So we are here to talk about Buffy Season 1, Episode 3, and the episode is titled Witch. As I mentioned in the last video, this may not be one that you want to watch, at least maybe not until after the series and you're already in love with the characters or something. But if you're just starting Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you may want to skip this episode along with several others that are in the first couple of seasons, because it's those seasons that are the most 90s that have episodes that you really can skip, that very little happens for the ongoing plot, and they're mostly about the monster of the week, which is a very 90s formula for television. So this episode has some things that it teaches us about the universe, but those can, for the most part, be given to you via this video, and I can just say, hey, as the title of this episode implies, maybe we're not just dealing with vampires in this universe. And so, spoiler alert, there are witches too. And so we're kind of getting the window opened for us, I guess, or we're learning a little bit more about this universe, and that vampires will not be the only things that are supernatural in this universe, and will not be the only things that Buffy is fighting. So, it's skippable if you're trying to fast track the first couple of seasons, but it does introduce us to the character of Amy, who will reappear after this episode. I guess that's a little bit of a spoiler, but we have, our main characters are sophomores. Amy is a student at their school. You're going to see her again. And you're going to see a lot of the other students that you see throughout the series, whether or not they ultimately become major characters or not. The show will reuse some actors and some stories, some characters. So in case you skipped this episode, the main premise is that Buffy's trying out for the cheerleading team. So she finds that the competition is really intense, and a girl starts to combust, spontaneously combust during her audition, and the gang discovers that it's probably a witch. So throughout the episode, they deduce that it's Amy, this student that they've sort of made friends with, who's trying out for the cheerleading team. So the guys go to Amy's house, and they find out that it's not actually Amy, it's Amy's mom, who has switched bodies with her younger daughter in an attempt to, well, of course her daughter's younger, anyway, has switched bodies with her daughter in order to relive her glory days as head cheerleader. Nuts, right? Thank goodness my mother's not that person. Anyway, the Scooby Gang, who are Buffy and her friends, who the internet and our fans will call Scooby Gang or Slayerettes or whatever, they shut this whole thing down. They stop Amy's mother, who is a witch, and Amy is returned to her body, and her mother is trapped in a cheerleading trophy at the school. Poetic justice, I guess. Buffy does not make the cheerleading team, and Amy doesn't either. They make alternates, but they don't make the team. Cordelia, of course, does make the cheerleading team, because what good are the popular girl stereotypes if the popular girl's not a cheerleader, right? Anyway. So, some things that, if you didn't watch the episode, you may have missed, or you may have missed even if you did watch the episode. So here's some kind of things that we learn throughout the episode. One of the things that we learn is that Xander's crush on Buffy isn't just a crush. He's pretty interested in her. He gives her a bracelet in this episode and tries to play it off as just a friendly gift, but it's clearly not just that. And we also see that Willow is jealous that Xander is buying jewelry for Buffy, because clearly Willow has been pining over Xander for some time. Buffy has been slaying for about a year, and Xander and Willow have been sort of welcomed into this slaying circle as the Slayer Rats, as they say in this episode. But as I mentioned previously, fans will call them that. They will call them the Scooby Gang, the Scoobies. Those are names that have been used to describe this little group of people who were following through this show. Xander checks out witchcraft books from the school library for the semi-nude engravings. Buffy's mom appears to not totally keep up with her activities at school. And Buffy was a cheerleader at Hemery High, her old school, before coming to Sunnydale. Amy Madison's mother is a witch. Amy now knows that Buffy is a Slayer, so she's one of the few students at school who knows this now about Buffy. Buffy's mom owns an art gallery, so that's what she does for a living. And Xander's last name is Harris, so his name is Alexander Harris. So those are some things that we learned throughout the episode. Another thing that I want to mention, since Buffy is involving Willow and Xander in kind of the goings-on of Slayerdom, is that she really wants them to be safe, and she really wants them to not be there for instances in which they are not going to be safe. And I think it's important that we recognize that she's trying to protect her friends, to learn from them and to involve them for their skills, but they don't hold superpowers, and Buffy, they don't leap into the fray the way that Buffy does, because that would be irresponsible. So some of what's going on in this episode is the popularity game. Buffy, like many high school girls, wants to be a cheerleader. And in some ways, it's the gateway to popularity, and I think that our media has done a lot to reinforce that idea, but Buffy was popular at her old school and wants to be again. As we can see, Buffy wants to get away from her Slayer past and sort of recreate her old life. She wants to go back to those things that she was doing before she was the Slayer and reclaim normalcy. And of course, as we've already discussed, Buffy does not reclaim her cheerleading identity, and she doesn't reclaim her popularity. Maybe there's no going back, but Buffy's really trying to find a normal life. So she wants to be a cheerleader again, even though that doesn't happen. And as the show suggests, it's maybe for the best. It's a bad experience all around, this audition process. And aside from the spells and magic things that happen, which are metaphors for the vindictive behaviors of women, of some women, the girls are also, just mean. Clearly Amy Madison's mom is resorting to witchcraft in order to knock other girls off the path in front of her. Some of the other girls who don't have any superpowers are just really rude and I wouldn't want to be on a cheerleading team with those women, because I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time with those women. They're mean. So even if there wasn't a witch attacking people literally, the attitudes of some of the cheerleaders, and they're equally toxic. Maybe not equally, because words can't literally set any of us on fire, but does this mean that all cheerleaders are mean? Of course not. But neither is a cheerleader position a ticket to popularity or happiness. We should do things with our life, with our time, that build our strengths and bring us joy. And clearly, as we find out by the end of this episode, cheerleading is not going to be that thing for Buffy. It's not building her strengths. It's not bringing her joy. It's a miserable experience. So I think some of the questions that we could be asking about this episode, especially with people who are growing up, I mean, we're all growing up, but who are earlier in the process of growing up maybe, are there ways in which we are pursuing other people's dreams instead of our own? In this episode, Buffy's mom suggests that she should try out for the yearbook. That's what she did. And we see this element of Joyce that wants Buffy to maybe become who she was in some ways. And clearly we see that with Amy Madison's mother, who wants Amy to become her, and then when that's not Amy, she tries to do it herself. I think what this episode in a lot of ways is trying to show us is that we shouldn't go after other people's lives. We shouldn't go after other people's goals. Each of us has our own strengths and weaknesses and joys and things we don't enjoy. And we should take those things into consideration when we build our lives and when we decide how we're going to spend our energies and our time. Because what other people want for us may not necessarily be what we are suited to. How important is popularity? And what does it mean to be popular? Clearly, Buffy was popular, and Cordelia is popular. And what does it mean anything about those characters? Was Buffy formerly a really mean person and now she's not? Is Cordelia a fundamentally mean person? I think that those are questions that we will continue to explore as we get to know each of our characters. Is it fair for parents to push their children into certain activities? I think oftentimes parents will push their children to do some kind of activity, take a certain language, go on a certain trip, with good intentions. They want them to have a particular experience or gain a certain strength, get to know a certain environment or people. Joyce suggests that Buffy should try yearbook, but she doesn't make her do that. Should Joyce be more insistent? Or is she already being too pushy? Xander likes Buffy. It's clear that Xander likes Buffy. But it doesn't seem like Buffy shares his interest or even sees it. It seems a little bit like Buffy might be developing a crush on Angel a little bit. That doesn't seem to be super serious yet. But it seems like Buffy's really oblivious to the feelings that Xander has. Willow also seems to like Xander, and it's unclear whether or not he notices that. I don't think we have the answer to that yet. What does it mean when someone doesn't return our romantic feelings? It seems like it kind of sucks, at least for these characters. But what is that like? What does it mean when someone doesn't return our affections? It seems like that's happening with Xander and Willow, and it's unclear whether or not Buffy will wake up to Xander's interests and discern for herself whether she returns those feelings. Can people be friends when one person has an attraction that the other does not return? And I think we will continue to explore these questions. And hopefully with some better episodes as our example. But our next episode is episode 4. And you might want to skip that episode too. Okay.